The invasion equation. The observation probe hung silently in the asteroid belt of the unremarkable yellow star system, recording and analyzing. For 3 orbital cycles, it had been gathering data on the third planet, a blue-green world teeming with life and dominated by a single bipedal species that had spread across its surface with remarkable speed. Commander Vexlerin studied the holographic display floating above the command deck of the Kelsari dreadnought in inevitable conclusion. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of both interest and skepticism common to his species. "This is the threat that has the High Council concerned?" he asked, mandibles clicking softly. "They've barely managed spaceflight. Their most distant outpost is on their own satellite." Science Director Tala Ren gestured with her upper limbs, causing the display to zoom in on Earth's major cities. Her skin shifted to a contemplative shade of violet. "Their development curve is concerning," she replied, her voice a melodic series of harmonic tones. "They've progressed from primitive combustion engines to rudimentary artificial intelligence in less than 200 cycles. The predictive models suggest they could achieve practical faster-than-light travel within 50 cycles." Vexlerin circled the display, his exoskeleton gleaming under the ambient light of the command deck. The Kelsari Collective had encountered 47 spacefaring species in their 20,000 cycles of exploration. None had presented a significant challenge to their technological superiority. "The directive is clear," he stated. "Preemptive integration is authorized when a species demonstrates rapid technological advancement that could threaten collective stability." Tala Ren's skin rippled with blue uncertainty. "There are anomalies in their behavioral patterns that our models struggle to quantify." "Specifics," Vexlerin demanded. "They engage in recreational activities that involve significant physical risk. They deliberately seek out environments hostile to their physiological requirements. They display individual variation in decision-making that exceeds standard deviation parameters for sentient species." Vexlerin dismissed her concerns with a flick of his secondary appendage. "All irrelevant. The mathematical probability of successful integration is 98.7%. The High Council has authorized first contact, followed by immediate assimilation." The science director's skin darkened. "I recommend extended observation. Their historical archives show consistent resistance to external control." "Recommendation noted and rejected," Vexlerin declared. "Prepare the contact vessels." Dr. Eleanor Chen stood on the observation platform at Artemis Lunar Base, watching Earth rise over the Moon's horizon. After 5 years stationed here, the sight still took her breath away. Her comm unit chimed softly. "Director Chen, you're needed in the anomaly lab immediately." "On my way," she replied, reluctantly turning away from the view. The anomaly lab had been in a state of controlled chaos for the past 72 hours, ever since the long-range detection systems had picked up the objects decelerating into the solar system. Objects that defied natural explanation. "What have we got?" she asked as she entered the lab. Dr. Imran Kazingni looked up from his workstation, his expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "They're slowing down more, Director. Changing course, heading directly for Earth orbit. No question now, they're artificial and controlled." Eleanor felt her heart race. Humanity had debated the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence for centuries. Now, the question was answered. Time to orbit. Approximately 18 hours at current deceleration. Eleanor took a deep breath. "Alert the Security Council. Implement First Contact Protocol Alpha. And Imran." She paused, meeting his gaze. "Let's hope they're friendly." Tactical Officer Mezcor studied the planetary defense systems with growing confusion. "Commander, their orbital platforms appear to be primarily scientific instrumentation. I detect minimal weapons capability." Vexlerin's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "As expected, they rely on internal conflict to drive technological development. They've never faced an external threat." "They've detected us," Communications Specialist Grelpax announced. We're receiving primitive electromagnetic transmissions on multiple frequencies. Establish translation matrix. Prepare standard first contact package. The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. The Kelsari had incorporated 12 species into their collective over the millennia. The process was methodical, scientific, and, when necessary, brutally efficient. Commander, Tala Ren interjected, I must once again urge caution. Our probes detected unusual quantities of fissionable materials in their weapons systems. They've developed atomic weaponry despite their limited technological advancement. Primitive atomic weapons pose no threat to our vessels. Vex Loren replied dismissively. It's not the weapons themselves, but the willingness to develop them despite the obvious environmental risks to their own habitat. It suggests a psychological profile that. Science Director, Vex Loren interrupted. Your concerns are noted, but the equation is clear. The humans will be incorporated into the collective. Resistance is a mathematical impossibility. The first contact broadcast reached every communications device on Earth simultaneously. The message was simple and transmitted in 314 human languages. People of Earth, we are the Kelsari Collective. Your species has been selected for incorporation into our galactic community. Resistance is futile and mathematically irrational. Your technological and biological distinctiveness will be preserved and utilized for the greater harmony of the collective. Prepare receiving areas in your major population centers for integration liaisons. In the White House Situation Room, President Martina Alvarez stared at the screens displaying the alien vessels now in Earth orbit. 7 massive ships, each estimated to be at least 5 kilometers in length. Options? She asked, her voice steady despite the unprecedented crisis. Diplomatic engagement is our first priority. Secretary of State Williams responded. But we need to prepare for all contingencies. General Okonkwo, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, spoke next. We've activated all defense protocols, Madam President. Space Command reports our orbital platforms have been neutralized without engaging. They simply stopped working. They're making a show of force. Director Chen added via secure link from Lunar Base, demonstrating technological superiority. President Alvarez nodded. Open a direct channel. Let's try talking before anything else. Vex Loren was surprised when his communications officer reported that the humans were requesting direct dialogue. Most species responded to first contact with either panic or immediate submission. Establish connection, he ordered. Let us hear what they have to say before we begin the integration process. The holographic display shifted to show a female human in formal attire, surrounded by other humans in what appeared to be a command center. I am President Martina Alvarez of the United Earth Alliance. We welcome peaceful contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, but we must insist that you withdraw your forces from Earth orbit immediately. Your presence and your message are being interpreted as hostile by my people. Vex Loren's mandibles clicked in amusement. The translation was accurate, but surely there was some error. No species at this level of development had ever demanded anything of the collective. Human leader, he responded, your demands are irrelevant. Integration will proceed according to established protocols. The process will minimize disruption to your civilization, while maximizing the efficiency of incorporation. The human female's expression hardened. We have no intention of being incorporated into anything. We are a sovereign species. Any attempt to force your will upon us will be met with resistance. Resistance is mathematically futile, Vex Loren stated. The technological disparity between our civilizations makes the outcome inevitable. Accept this reality. The transmission ended abruptly. Vex Loren turned to his tactical officer. Deploy the integration units to the designated population centers. Use minimal suppression force unless resistance exceeds projected parameters. Tala Ren's skin had turned a deep indigo, a warning coloration. Commander, I believe we are making a grave miscalculation. Within 6 hours of the failed negotiation, Kelsari landing craft descended toward 20 major cities across Earth. Their approach was methodical, precise, and utterly confident. What happened next would be studied in Kelsari military academies for generations to come. In Beijing, the landing craft was met with a barrage of electromagnetic pulses that somehow penetrated its shields, disabling its navigation systems and sending it crashing into the Great Wall. In London, the air around the descending craft suddenly ignited in a chemical reaction that the Kelsari environmental systems had failed to detect or predict. In Rio de Janeiro, the landing zone was evacuated minutes before the craft touched down, not in panic, but with organized precision. When Kelsari integration troops emerged, they found themselves in a prepared kill zone. On the inevitable conclusion, Vexlerin watched in growing disbelief as status indicators for landing craft shifted from green to amber to red across the tactical display. "Impossible," he whispered. "The probability calculations were wrong," Talleyrand finished. "As I tried to warn you, humans don't follow predictable response patterns." Communications channels flooded with reports from the surface. Kelsari integration forces encountered not panicked civilians but organized resistance, using tactics that exploited weaknesses in Kelsari technology that should have been unknowable to the humans. How are they coordinating their defense so effectively? Mezcor asked in confusion. "We've neutralized their global communication networks." Talleyrand's skin shifted to the pale yellow of sudden insight. They prepared for this. Not for us specifically, but for any scenario where normal communications might fail. They've been imagining alien invasions in their entertainment media for centuries. Vexlerin's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "Dispatch the second wave. Increase suppression protocols to maximum." "Commander," Talleyrand protested, "we need to reassess. The humans are demonstrating capabilities outside our predictive models." "The equation is clear," Vexlerin insisted, though with less conviction than before. "Technological superiority guarantees victory. It's simply a matter of applying sufficient force." As the second wave of integration forces descended toward Earth, the tactical display suddenly erupted with new alert indicators. Hundreds of small craft were lifting off from Earth, rising to meet the Kelsari vessels. "Analysis," Vexlerin demanded. "Primitive chemical rockets," Mezcor reported. "No significant weapon systems detected. They pose no threat to our vessels." But as the human craft approached, they suddenly altered course in perfect unison, accelerating beyond their projected capabilities. And from each one loomed a silent flash of nuclear fire. The electromagnetic pulses washed over the Kelsari vessels like invisible tsunamis. Systems failed. Shields collapsed. Communication channels dissolved into static. "Emergency protocols." Vexlerin shouted as the command deck lighting flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency illumination. "Report." No one answered. The sophisticated neural interfaces that connected the crew to the ship's systems had gone silent. In the eerie quiet of the crippled dreadnought, Talleyrand's voice emerged from the darkness, her skin glowing with the azure hue of grim satisfaction. "I believe," she said softly, "we need to recalculate the human variable." The recalculation. 3 days after what Earth media had dubbed the repulse, Commander Vexlerin stood before what remained of his command staff in the auxiliary control center of the inevitable conclusion. The primary systems remained offline, with repair estimates extending to weeks rather than days. "Explain," he demanded, his mandibles rigid with controlled fury. How did a pre-FTL civilization manage to neutralize 7 Kelsari dreadnoughts? Tactical Officer Mezcor's exoskeleton was scored with burn marks from electrical feedback during the attack. The humans detonated precisely calculated nuclear devices in near orbit. The electromagnetic pulses were specifically modulated to penetrate our shield frequencies. "That's impossible," Vexlerin insisted. "They couldn't have known our shield specifications." Science Director Talleyrand stepped forward, her skin cycling through analytical shades of green and blue. "Actually, Commander, they didn't need to. They simply launched multiple devices with varying output signatures, a remarkably inefficient but effective approach. They sacrificed hundreds of launch vehicles to ensure a few would be effective. And now, Vexlerin asked, we have limited sublight capability. Communications with the collective remain severed. The integration forces on the surface report fragmented resistance, but are holding established positions. Vexlerin paced the circumference of the holographic display, which now showed a simplified tactical overview due to power restrictions. The equation must be rebalanced. We underestimated certain variables, but the outcome remains mathematically inevitable. We will adapt our approach. Talaren's skin rippled with skepticism. Commander, I believe we need to fundamentally reassess our understanding of human psychology. Their resistance indicates. It indicates nothing except that our initial force calculation was insufficient. Vexlerin interrupted. Prepare all functional combat units for a coordinated planetary assault. In the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Alvarez surveyed the global situation map. Kelsari forces had established footholds in 12 major cities worldwide, but their advance had stalled. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in uncomfortable silence. Your analysis, Science Director? Vexlerin finally asked. Talaren's skin had settled into a deep, contemplative indigo. The humans possess a quality I've never encountered in any spacefaring species. Most civilizations develop along predictable lines, emphasizing either technological advancement, biological adaptation, or social cooperation. Humans have somehow balanced all three, creating a remarkably versatile species. Your recommendation? Withdrawal and extensive study. The humans represent an anomaly that deserves careful analysis, not conquest. Vexlerin's mandibles clicked slowly as he considered. Everything in his training, his experience, and his understanding of the universe told him that superior technology always prevailed. The equation was fundamental to the collective's expansion across the galaxy. But the evidence before him defied the equation. Prepare withdrawal protocols, he ordered finally, and establish a formal communication channel for negotiation of terms. 1 month later, Eleanor Chen stood in the newly established Interspecies Communication Center in Geneva, watching the holographic representation of Science Director Talaren. The Kelsari vessels had withdrawn to the outer solar system while negotiations continued. Your species continues to confound our predictive models, Talaren admitted, her skin cycling through curious shades of blue and green. We have reviewed the data from our engagement and still cannot reconcile the outcomes with established mathematical principles. Perhaps that's because you're trying to quantify what can't be fully measured, Eleanor suggested. Human unpredictability isn't a bug in our system, it's a feature. We evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill us, surrounded by predators and disasters. We survived by being adaptable, by thinking differently when standard approaches failed. A dangerous evolutionary path, Talaren observed. Most species develop consistent response patterns to ensure group survival. We developed consistent goals but inconsistent methods, Eleanor explained. We all want to survive, to protect our families and communities, but how we achieve those goals varies wildly between individuals and cultures. The Kelsari's skin rippled with what Eleanor had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. This has significant implications for the collective's understanding of sentient development. Perhaps there is more than one valid evolutionary path to advanced civilization. Eleanor smiled. That's the most human observation I've heard you make, Director, questioning your fundamental assumptions in light of new evidence. I have submitted a formal recommendation to the High Council, Talaren continued. I have suggested that Earth be classified not as a candidate for integration, but as a potential research partner. Your species' approach to problem-solving could benefit the collective in ways we have not yet imagined. And Commander Vexlerin, does he share your view? Talaren's skin flickered briefly with amusement. The commander has been reassigned to exploratory duties in an uninhabited sector. The Council was displeased with the outcome of the integration attempt and the non-aggression treaty. It will be ratified. The preliminary findings of my research have convinced the Council that humans would make extremely dangerous enemies and potentially valuable allies. As the communication ended, Eleanor looked out the window at the Geneva skyline. Humanity had faced its first extraterrestrial threat and survived not through overwhelming force, but through its most quintessential qualities: adaptability, ingenuity, and the unpredictable creativity that emerged from billions of individual minds working both independently and together. The equation had been recalculated, and humanity had proven itself a variable that could not be easily solved. The EMP strategy worked better than expected, General Okonkwo reported. Their ground forces are cut off from orbital support. Regional commanders are reporting successful containment operations in most theaters. Casualties? The president asked. Approximately 300,000 civilian casualties, primarily in the initial landing zones. Military losses at approximately 12% of engaged forces. President Alvarez closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the terrible cost. When she opened them, her resolve was evident. What about the alien prisoners? Dr. Eleanor Chen, evacuated from Lunar Base before it was neutralized by the Kelsari, stepped forward. We've captured 63 individuals from 3 different species, all apparently part of this collective. Preliminary communication has been established with 2 of them. And what have we learned? They're as confused by us as we are by them, Chen explained. From what we can gather, their society is built around mathematical certainty. They calculate outcomes before taking action and cannot comprehend how their models fail to predict our response. They thought we'd just surrender. Secretary Williams asked incredulously. Essentially, yes. Their previous encounters with other civilizations followed predictable patterns. We didn't. The president studied the status of the damaged alien vessels still in orbit. Can we communicate with their leadership? We've established a rudimentary channel, Chen confirmed, but they've been demanding our surrender, not negotiation. Keep the channel open, President Alvarez ordered, and prepare our second phase response. The 3rd day of the ground campaign had gone no better than the first 2 for the Kelsari integration forces. Human resistance was not diminishing as predicted. It was adapting, evolving, becoming more effective with each engagement. They're communicating through methods we cannot detect or intercept. Mezcor reported with evident frustration, and their tactics change hourly. There's no discernible pattern to exploit. Vexlerin stared at the tactical display, his certainty eroding with each new report of failed operations. The integration units were designed for orderly population control, not protracted warfare against an endlessly adaptive enemy. We still hold superior technology, he insisted, though more to himself than his officers. A technology they are rapidly learning to counter, Tala Ren pointed out. Her skin had settled into a steady pattern of analytical blue with undertones of cautionary amber. Commander, the humans are displaying the characteristic I've never observed in any species: collective individuality. That's a contradiction. Vexlerin snapped. Precisely. And that's what makes them so dangerous. Each human unit operates independently, making decisions based on local conditions rather than centralized command. Yet somehow, these independent actions form cohesive strategies. It's as if they instinctively understand each other's intentions without explicit communication. The communications console chimed with an incoming transmission from the surface. Vexlerin hesitated, then nodded to Grulpax to accept it. The holographic display showed the same human female leader, though now she wore different attire and appeared to be in a different location. Commander of the Kelsari forces, she began without preamble. I am authorized to offer terms for your withdrawal from Earth space. Vexlerin's mandibles clicked in surprise. You are in no position to offer terms, human. Your resistance, while unexpected, cannot ultimately succeed. I disagree, she replied calmly. In the past 72 hours, your ground forces have suffered approximately 30% casualties. Your vessels remain disabled in orbit. Meanwhile, we have begun reverse engineering your technology from captured equipment and personnel. She gestured, and the display split to show human scientists working on disassembled Kelsari equipment. Impossible, Vexlarin whispered. Our technology is genetically encoded. Non-collective species cannot operate it. That was true, the human acknowledged, until we identified the specific bioelectric frequency your systems respond to. We can now mimic it mechanically. Tala Ren's skin paled to almost white, the Kelsari equivalent of shock. Commander, if they've truly broken the genetic encoding. Vexlarin silenced her with a gesture. What are your terms, human? Immediate withdrawal of all your forces from Earth, release of all human prisoners, a formal non-aggression pact between Earth and your collective. And, if we refuse. The human's expression didn't change, but her voice hardened. Then we will continue to adapt to your technology until we can not only defend against it, but weaponize it. The longer you stay, the more we learn. And unlike you, Commander, we don't require mathematical certainty before taking action.